Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to our Leap Venture Academy class on product management for pet care startups. Really excited for you all to join us here today. It's going to be a really cool session and certainly a topic that a lot of people need to learn about, including myself. And so thank you to Jordan, who is joining us today from Whistle. He's the VP of Product Management, new to the team. He'll go into his background, I'm sure, a little bit in a later, as soon as we get started. Just some housekeeping. It'll probably be a 20 to 30 minute presentation of some sort, followed by 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A. We'll keep on going until the time runs out or there are no more questions. You can ask questions at any time in the group chat. I'll be monitoring that, and then I'll chime in as we're going through, or we'll wait until the end depending on what's happening. We'll try to get to all the questions, and sometimes we won't be able to get to them all, and we'll answer them at a later time. You'll be muted the entire time. If you haven't muted yourself, if you could go ahead and mute yourself other than Jordan, that would be tremendous. And as I said, this session is being recorded, so don't say or do it. And so just a little bit about Leap Ventures, so we're all on the same page. We are here to support startups like you. We're trying to create programming and content and opportunities for investment or prize money for startups like you, so you can really make a difference and an impact in the pet care space. We've been doing this for the last year or so, year and a half, and we do this primarily through I'll get to that in a second, through two programs. Leap Venture Academy, which is, you're on one of our programming for that. Essentially, that's boot camps, webinars, meetups, pitch competitions, all free of charge, all free to the public, and a way for us to build community around pet care and to make a difference in the world of pets. And then we have Leap Venture Studio, which I think a lot of you just completed the application for. So that is our premier program for the best of the best upcoming startups that need funding or are getting funding. We put them through a 3-month accelerator program with giving access to mentors and advisors and all that jazz. It is a partnership between two organizations, Michelson Found Animals. If you haven't looked them up, you should definitely check them out. They are a really cool social nonprofit in the Los Angeles area. They run a couple of adoption shops. They do a microchipping program, and they invest in pet care startups as well, and really doing some cool policy work in the pet care space. And then Kinship, which is a division of Mars Pet Care, which Whistle is also a part of. We are, creating this community around pet care and really investing in creating new products that are really trying to improve the lives of pets in a digital world. And with that, do that in less than 4 minutes. We're gonna bring on Jordan and his team over there. I'm gonna stop sharing and send it over to you. Jordan, thanks for joining.
Hey guys. Thanks so much for having us here. I'll give a little bit of background on myself. I'll let Stan introduce himself, and then we can kind of dive into slides. As was mentioned, I am rather new, VP of Product here. Been here almost 3 months now. And so we'll actually be talking about a major launch we had recently that I actually wasn't here for, which is one of the reasons I brought in Stan, who's an OG here at Whistle, who's been through a lot of launches and has a lot of pet care expertise. So,
So Stan Witowski, I've been at Whistle for almost 4 years. So I've been on the product team for 3 of those launches, 3 of the big hardware launches, if you will. Kind of seen all the highs and lows in terms of launching a consumer product. So.
Cool. And, in terms of what we wanted to talk about today, we weren't exactly sure the mix of the audience who was going to be here. So we put together a little bit more general presentation, and then, hope to get a lot through question and answer as well. So let me see if I can present here. I've never actually presented in...
Do I have to make you presenter? Maybe that's...
Sure. Let me see. I think I got it.
Ah, there you got it.
Cool. All right. So get this out of the way. You guys see that all right?
Yep, looks great.
Cool. So just a little high-level background on Whistle, what we do, in case you guys aren't familiar with us. We'll get a little bit after that into kind of high-level what is product management for those of you who haven't actually worked at a tech startup before or not as familiar with what we do. And then a little bit about some advice on launching products that I've had from kind of my experience here and previous to Whistle, as well as Stan's experience here at Whistle. So here's the timeline of Whistle. Whistle is the leader in pet wearable tracking for fitness and for health and location. And so if you look way back in the timeline here, in October 2013, Whistle launched their first activity monitor. This was coming out, there was a lot of hype around wearables and Fitbit, et cetera, and this was basically that for pets. So how much activity did they get during a day? How many steps did they get? And it is a good way to kind of connect with your dog, make sure they were getting enough exercise, et cetera. They brought on capabilities through an acquisition of Tag in 2015. They brought on capabilities to start tracking location of the pet. And this is where Whistle really found its kind of product market fit, where there's a lot of people who have escape artists for dogs. Dog may be in the backyard and just bolt, and historically you have no idea where to go look for them, what to do when they leave their backyard. And so what Whistle did was design a product where you can get alerted if your pet leaves a designated area. The collar that you can see here has GPS and a cell signal. So no matter where they are, they can basically be found. You could get a ping on their location and go pick them up and bring them back home. We were launched in 2017, Q1, the next generation of the Whistle products. In between there, we were actually acquired by Mars Pet Care, which is how we became part of the Kinship family. And we launched in 2017, we launched the Whistle 3, which until this year has been, I think, the best-selling pet tracker basically on the market. Launched our Whistle Fit. Let me see if I can do this here. We launched in 2018. We launched Whistle Fit in partnership with the Pet Insight project, which is also part of Kinship. And this is basically a non-GPS, kind of harkening back to the 2013 release, a non-GPS version here that has much more detailed accelerometers. And what we've been working on there, which we'll get into, is much more of our health offering, where we are able to take work done by the Pet Insight team, take thousands and thousands, I think over 50,000 dogs basically as part of a study, taking the data from this Whistle unit and doing a bunch of machine learning on that and coming out with things like how much your dog is scratching, how much your dog is licking, et cetera. So moving into an area where we can determine a lot more about your dog than just where it is.
Yeah, and on the Fit specifically, that was in partnership with Banfield Pet Hospitals. We had the unique ability to look at medical records as well and tie some of those metrics back to actual medical records and reasons why pets are coming in to see the vet and tying that correlation there. So we're in a very unique, advantageous scenario to actually do that study.
Yeah, so that leads us to kind of where Whistle was at the beginning of last year. And we'll talk a little bit about what that launch was kind of going forward. But yeah.
Actually, just one other note too. Sorry, since this is the product management. The transition from the original Whistle Activity Monitor back in 2013 to Tag was done primarily through a lot of customer development. So when they first launched the Whistle Activity Monitor, this was in PetSmart, it was in Petco, so it was in brick and mortar sort of pet stores. They did have a core user base that definitely liked the product, but overwhelmingly the number one feature that was lacking was the ability to track their pet. And so a lot of this, if they had known this ahead of time, Whistle might have launched a GPS tracker. But this is sort of, as they brought the product to market, as they're sort of still figuring out product market fit, the lack of GPS was really sort of the big piece that they felt that the original founders of Whistle felt that was missing. And so hence sort of you see that big deviation from what the product offering was at the initial launch of Whistle and what it became quickly later in a couple of years. So
Great point.
Can I ask a quick question, Assad?
Yeah.
When you think about product, I mean, for you guys, it's hardware, but it's also software. Is that correct?
100%.
Yeah.
And it's app, website, and product.
Yeah. So today we have all three. Especially initially, I think Whistle. The original Activity Monitor was just an iOS and Android-based mobile app. So it's a little different with hardware, right? Because the hardware or the software is complementary to the experience. You bring up a really good point though too, because there's different hardware experiences you guys are probably familiar with, where you can use the software without the hardware. There's also areas where you have to have the hardware in order to use the software. And so it's actually one area that Whistle is beginning to kind of move towards. So historically, we've kind of gated the experience by requiring the actual hardware. As you can imagine, growing, if you're trying to grow your user base, forcing someone to shell out $80 plus a subscription, there's a lot of friction involved. There's to begin able to try their product, especially these day and age where people are used to try before you buy, right? And so I think we don't get into it specifically, but it is a clear distinction, Assad, and one that Whistle's, as we move into our growth phase, and we'll get into different phases of where Whistle's at, right, is how do we get more people engaged with their product? And one of that is removing as much friction and barrier as possible, and having an experience that doesn't require a device is actually one potential great way to sort of expand that growth.
Yeah, and to your question about what do we consider product and how it impacts, particularly in this case, you had thought it would be interesting to talk about launches, and launches can be very different for hardware and software and website related things. And so we'll get to that in a little bit as well. But from the product perspective, planning around those, it definitely, you have to know what is going into it and what type of product it is to really have an effective launch strategy.
And one other point too, we talked about hardware versus software. I think we internally, especially as you're building companies, like to segment those things, even from marketing to anything else. One thing to keep in mind as you're talking to customers is they don't see those differences. They don't look at it as, the hardware are developers themselves, but for the majority of part, they see Whistle as just one unified experience. And so it's really important to keep that in mind as you're thinking of building product and a customer support team and all facets that go into it, is they're looking at the lens as it's just Whistle and it's all part of Whistle, or it's all part of whichever brand or product you're bringing to market. And it's not that we might look at it as different lens, but your consumer most likely is not.
Can you guys lower your camera a little bit and maybe move closer together?
You want to see our kinship?
Two floating heads.
Our kinship poster in the background.
Right. Can you also tell me where to get a gray T-shirt or a gray?
Yeah.
We totally did not plan our matching today.
It's actually a required uniform here at Whistle. All right, let me see. Here we go. So this is just kind of a high-level slide of where the investment thesis of Mars buying Whistle, and kind of where we think we can help Mars in the general ecosystem of pet care. Looking at on one hand you have vets, you have dog walking services, etc. There's a whole lot of different areas where we think Whistle can be a linchpin and a communication point between Mars and the rest of the pet care ecosystem. So this is the latest line, which we'll talk about a little bit today in terms of at the end of that timeline where we had launched Whistle 3 in a fit. This July, we launched Whistle Go and Whistle Go Explore. And this was a notable transition for us because on one hand, as Stan mentioned, it is the beginning of how we see our trajectory from a purely hardware company into a hardware, I guess, a services company or a hardware ecosystem with a lot of other services. And so there was not only a big hardware launch, but also a big kind of messaging change around our new health monitoring capabilities and other features that we're launching that are software only. So it was big in that sense. It was also big in the sense that this is the first time we've launched something where there was multiple different SKUs and multiple different colors of SKUs. And if anybody has questions around that, that's definitely been a point of learning around us in terms of how to manage that as well. Whistle Fit. So this is actually something that has traditionally research partnership, as we mentioned, but we're starting to evaluate now. Is there a place in the market for this as well? And so we're starting to talk to people about who aren't necessarily keen on GPS and don't need to know where their dog is all the time. We're at the phases now where we're seeing if these health offerings and these other things that we're touting of the platform are a pared down whistle. This is hidden here. This is
Did we lose you guys?
I must have lost me here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me.
I hear you.
Again. You can hear it.
Nice.
All right.
Presentation.
I think we lost the last minute and a half or something.
Yep.
Where is? Sorry. I don't know where we. Where's my? There we go. I'm not sharing it. Get out of this. And into Zoom. Can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Can you still see it?
It is loading, and yep, now we can see it.
Okay, cool. So we were just starting to talk here about some of the pillars that we work with. So safety is basically kind of our breadwinner at the moment. As Stan mentioned, this was really something kind of helped us find product to market fit. Fitness, another one of the original pillars. How much is your dog exercising? We know that obesity is a major problem in pets, something that we're really serious about tackling, making sure your pet is getting out there, nudging people over time to make sure they're getting an exercise. Health is the newest feature, which I mentioned. So using all of the data we have from the collar to be able to predict things like how much they are scratching, licking, sleeping, the overall general well-being of your pet. There's the harmony pillar, and this is really around, how can we help users with the more mundane tasks of taking care of a dog? So coordinating medications. We just launched a feature called Reminders, where you can set a reminder for flea and tick and other types of medications. You can get an alert if somebody else in your household already fulfilled that, so they already gave them the medicine. You don't need to do it.
I love that.
And so that's kind of how can we really take on some of the responsibility of being a good pet parent. And then really the last pillar here is joy. And so how can we think about augmenting your relationship with your pet and making it as special as it can be, getting everything else out of the way, connecting pets together to have a more enjoyable experience overall.
Yeah, I would say one note on this, where the evolution of this is, the safety was our core pillar, right? That was sort of the main reason why people or consumers purchased the product initially. That was our That was our core offering. And we had great product market fit there. As Whistle over the years is looking to grow, like any, company in their adolescence, you're really looking forward to what are other reasons why people might purchase your product, right? And so there's a clear, for people who had an issue with location, it was like, oh my God, this is a no-brainer. I need this for my dog. How come I never heard of it? However, if you had, like Jordan mentioned, Toby, a smaller dog, or dogs that just weren't prone to escaping, they immediately discarded Whistle as a product offering that can aid them. And so as we're looking to grow in the company, 5, 10x over the next 10 years, we identify these pillars as different adjacent offerings that essentially that would actually be product. Then they were here to make money, right? And sorry, I didn't mean like
That's not
that,
what you're supposed to say.
But what I meant to say is like, what are reasons people will actually pay for, right? So there's a lot of things that are for free, and so we're trying to uncover what are the other sort of pain points and real pain points that customers will actually purchase the product for. And so that's sort of the evolution of this pillar management. And as Jordan mentioned, health is actually sort of it's our big bet going forward. Not just because we're in Mars Pet Care, but frankly because just like it doesn't matter who you are, the health of your pet is actually paramount to any pet owner.
Yeah, and it's really an area where we talk a lot about. Your pet can't tell you if they're itchy. Like you can observe them itching. They can't tell you if they're not feeling well, if they're sick. So how can we, with our devices, help be the voice of that pet and tell that pet parent what's needed, and also give the pet parent confidence that they are doing the right thing for the user. Because there's countless number of times where they, not only are you getting the information something might be wrong, but like, what do you do about that information? Do you need to bring them into a vet? Is it okay on your own? Do you just need to monitor it? And we want to get to a place where we can be that companion for people on the health journey of their pet.
Take action.
Yeah.
If there's any questions, feel free to
for sure.
jump in too.
Just shout out. This I'll kind of skim through more, just kind of the different types of users that we're looking at here in terms of personas. Yeah.
Go back to just super quick too. I think one thing to keep in mind, or as we're growing too, is we had this notion of who are our core customers and who are customers that we actually might not be customers today, but who we see as a target audience in the future. So for example, historically, Whistle, the modern pet parent, was not, it was an aspirational persona. It was a customer that we really wanted to go after, but it wasn't necessarily one customer that was using the product today. GPS that consumers had rural both, but as you're building the product and talking to customers and building out new feature sets to address certain audiences, right? It's important to keep in mind who exactly you're building it for, and it's okay to be laser focused on one and then grow over time. I think Whistle very much was laser focused on that loss, but then recognizing that we need to ultimately figure out who this new customer is we want to go after and what pain points they have. So this is our personas as they exist today, not necessarily where Whistle was originally. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. We talked a little bit about kind of being the voice of the pet, really giving you a view into your dog's world. And so just kind of reiterating some of the stuff around safety, fitness, health. How can we show a pet parent what's actually going on with their pet? So you can see here a diagram of a walk that this person took. A lot of people actually use this to figure out if their dog walker is actually going where they expected it to, and actually we've busted quite a few dog walkers over the years who haven't been doing that. But just kind of in all aspect of a dog's life, how do we help communicate that to the pet parent? Staying on top of the day, we have this notion of kind of your timeline where you can see where a dog went. Was it playing? Was it resting? Was it sleeping? And then also how do you connect other people with your dog? So a lot of people have households. and you can invite other people to share your pet with you so they can share in the responsibilities, whether that's checking off a medication or seeing when your significant other goes out on a walk and where they went. And so a really, really useful feature for pet parents. Health, we've talked a little bit about health. These screens are actually not current. And this is kind of some more health stuff. So we'll, just looking at the time here, we'll kind of go into product management. So talking with Asad a little bit, we weren't sure how many of the people on this call were going to be product managers, know about product management, et cetera. So just put together kind of a very high level view of what product management is for those of you who may not be kind of in the core tech scene here. And so it gives you a little bit of a window into what we do. And so none of this is necessarily original thinking by me, but kind of a couple different ways that people commonly talk about product management. So the first being product management is basically the intersection of user experience, who is the customer, what do they want, et cetera, technology, who's building that, what is the actual implementation that you need to do, talking with engineers, et cetera, and the business. And it's often put as the mini CEO of a product, although that's somewhat debatable. But really the product managers are the glue that really, binds the rest of the team together to get out a successful product to market. So if you think of any of your favorite your apps out there or services, chances are there is a product manager there who has been working with engineering, working with design, working with finance, working with marketing, and responsible for the end result of that product, and making sure that it's a product that people actually want to use.
I would just say, I'm making an assumption here that a lot of the people on the call today are startups or trying to start things off. In that sense, you are product too. You're kind of wearing all three of these hats, I imagine. And so in that sense, and you hear from different people, you are the PM, you are UX, you're a little bit of everything, maybe not engineering, but it's also typically one of the last things. So it is last things new growing companies tend to hire later on, because it's usually played by the role of the CEO for startups that are just getting off the ground. And since it is a lot more of intersection between different departments, it's typically one of the last roles startups would hire. And I say that obviously knowing that not every startup is the same. And so if you have much more technical founder, he might bring on a product leader much earlier on. If you are more product-led founder, bringing on another product person is probably something that comes a little bit later on down the road. So it really depends on the makeup of the team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's particularly one of the reasons why it's later to come on as well is because and I'll have a slide a little bit on this later, which is there's less of a discernible output that as a product manager, you spend so much of your day talking with people in meetings, like working on things. And, it's not like you can't build a website without a product manager. Like you can't build a website without an engineer, and you can't build it without a designer. You can build it without a product manager. You just at some point get to a stage where the outcome of that launch of that website is going to be better because you had, somebody centrally thinking about that and planning it out and making sure it's the right thing to launch.
Jordan, and I just want to be cognizant of time. We're about halfway through.
Okay.
So if you maybe like 10 more minutes on your slides, and then we'll get to some Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of go through this. I won't go into this. Last high-level slide on product management. This is just kind of stuff that I've pondered over time. Is what makes product management an interesting position where you typically know less than every single person you work with. Like you don't know enough engineering to be an engineer. You don't know enough design to be a designer, like all of that stuff, yet your role is still kind of critical to the success of a product. You're expected to have a wide range of competencies, but you actually have no direct outlet. So like I'm an Excel junkie. I've spent years doing that. And like most of my Excel these days is limited to, basic level roadmap and product plans and that kind of thing. And then as I mentioned, like a lot of people call it the mini CEO, but you actually have no direct control over anybody. And so one of the key components of being a product manager, a successful one, is your ability to convey a story and convince people what you want to build is the right thing to build with soft power, not with the ability to threaten them that they're going to be fired if they don't build it. But you really have to build a coalition, and that typically ends up building better products in the end anyways. So launching products, put together just a couple of high-level things as we went through the Whistle 4 launch here. You want to talk a little bit more about just that specifically?
Yeah, and I'll leave a lot for Q&A, but I think the biggest thing, as Jordan mentioned earlier, is looking at personas. We had a it was one product, and so we had like a one-size-fits-all. I think just like, looking at the consumer landscape, people, there's different price sensitivities for different products, different colors, different feature sets. And so this is our first foray into creating an actual, a line of products that ultimately might work better or be a better product offering for certain customers versus others. People like choices. And so I think that's sort of really that was sort of the genesis for creating sort of multiple SKUs. You'll see at the bottom here, collars as well. This is sort of a mix between sort of, honestly, issues with our attachment to collars, but also playing on this idea of looking at the Whistle experience as a more cohesive experience, and one that that just customers are proud to put on their collar. One underlying thing you don't see here, but a lot of the feedback we get, and when talking about design of the actual hardware itself, was there's a lot of historically there's been a lot of negative perception that the device looked like a shock collar, and so the color palette that we have here with the collars, these are our attempts to kind of combat that negative perception. And so you'll see sort of that was
as well as
strategy,
just the giving people ways to personalize.
Exactly.
Like it as Dan said, people see their dog as kind of an expression of themselves, and some dogs are going to be magenta dogs, and other dogs are going to be green or gray dogs, and giving people the option to choose.
Yep.
So coming from this launch, we put together just a couple of very high level things that we think people should think about as they're launching products. The first one of these is upfront, as much as possible, try to determine what kind of launch this is actually going to be. Now, obviously, this is different. If you are launching your product for, like, the first time, it's going to be a major launch. But when we're looking at our product launches here, we try to break them down into tiers. So one is major hardware launch, big announcement, go to the press, make a big deal, bang pots and pans, etc. Tier 2 is a major software launch. So our health launch is one that we would consider a major tier 2 launch, where there's not a hardware component, but we still want to go to press, we still want to do the user outreach, talk to influencers, etc., make a big splash. Tier 3, this is something like we just launched our reminders feature, where we didn't really think that we could go to the Wall Street Journal and say, like, hey, we now let you get you a reminder to give flea and tick medication, but we made sure that we had user communication so that people know this feature is there. Did work a little bit with influencers and other people, so a little bit softer of a launch, but still a big project. And then there's the tier 4 launch, which is much more smaller, iterative software launches, not necessarily any communication to the users. And I will note that, like, just because something is tier 4 or tier 3 doesn't necessarily mean it's more or less important. Sometimes tier 4 can actually be the most important, in terms of you tweaked a little thing in the sign up page and it actually boosted your engagement up 20%. These can have major impacts on your businesses. But it's good to know up front, like, what are the, particularly for marketing, like, what are the marketing activities you're going to be doing around that launch?
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
And I know there are a couple questions that are coming in as well. You guys released July of this year. How long was that process for the hardware? Are we talking 18 months from design to 2 years? Is it 6 month sprint? What was it? What is it for you guys? And then what is it for generally would you advise startups?
Yeah, for us on the hardware side, the hardware itself was about an 18-month, and that's hardware fundamentally, as the name said. unlike software, you can't make changes on the fly. So you actually have to have that lead time. We also ran into just a few manufacturing issues with tariffs and things of that nature. We haven't mentioned this, but we also have firmware. So the firmware is actually what communicates between the device and the actual mobile and the software itself. So that is, as the name implies, not as quick as software, but doesn't have the lead time as hardware. And so you have that, and then you have software, which is much more iterative. Our software roadmap, I would say, became a bit more clear about 4 or 5 months prior to launch in terms of what that was going to be. So in reality, we were kind of juggling 3 roadmaps, if you will. So it's much more of like a program management. So we had kicked off the actual hardware, again, like 18 months before launch. We know we needed certain feature sets with that. And so the firmware was sort of very much coupled with the hardware. And then the software became a bit more clear as we got closer to launch in terms of what changes were going to be required on the software side and what new features were we going to add in addition to that. It is very different and is unique, especially for product managers to manage what is essentially a few different roadmaps, because they have mostly around different lead times and cost of change, right? People say software is, it is much easier to make those changes, right? Whereas if we screw something up on the hardware, it's not only does it take a lot of time, but it's going to be a much more expensive change for the business.
And having worked a lot on other non-hardware related products as well, it very much still depends on the product. So, sometimes consumer facing smaller startups, like, it could be 2 days of building something and you launch it and you deploy it. And that's a big feature for you. If you're a, larger moving SaaS company, you're going to want your roadmap out a year in advance, basically evangelizing the people because they're building their whole stacks on it.
And they're buying for the future too.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You're typically, a lot of the enterprise software, it's what you're buying a promise of what they're going to have, what you're going to have available in the future.
Sure. Did you have other questions on this slide or?
No, there's a bunch that came in, but I think we can get to the end. Yeah.
Cool. Quickly through this. So definitely be as aware as you can, particularly when you're talking about hardware stuff, but external factors that are impacting launch timing. So for example, we wanted to do a promotion for Prime Day with our inventory of an older generation once we launched the Whistle 4. That meant we needed to have that as like a hard date we needed to be able to launch the product for. And there's all sorts of different dates you might want to align with. And so thinking of that early, giving the rest of your team a heads up, particularly if you have a hardware feature, then you need to set that as far in advance as possible. And also be clear on internal blockers. So one I've run into before is, trying to launch a product in February and not realizing until it was too late that Chinese New Year's basically delayed all shipments out of China for 2-3 weeks. And so, make sure you work with supply chain and everybody else to try to predict these roadmaps that are going to come up. Another one that often comes up is other launches within the company at the same time. So if you're a hardware team planning a launch, and there's another big department that's doing something else around that time, you don't want to be launching at the same time as that. Knowing the story of your product before you build it definitely helps when you're thinking about launching a product. I have a quote here from Ian McAllister, who's kind of become famous for this, but writing the press release before you actually go and build the product. This is kind of what they do to get people aligned with, okay, this is something we want to work on. And where this comes in terms of launch is it's a lot easier to work backwards from that, and as well as know what are the primary things that from a marketing and sales perspective that we are going to be able to tout to a user. And if this is not so exciting when I write this press release, should we be building it? Or if there's too many things, which I think we ran into this a little bit with Whistle 4, there's a lot of things we wanted to launch. What are the top things that we should really focus on to make the marketing message really crisp and clear, and then prioritize things accordingly? User testing, huge, particularly if you have a hardware product, but also if you have a software product. We do alpha testing first, where it's mostly an internal group. So Assad will probably get, our next version of our thing, and he'll be able to kind of report bugs. This is really where our firmware engineers are kind of taking things through its paces and tuning, and then a beta testing. Definitely get it out there to a wide array of users, a diverse set of users. One thing where we felt that we could have been stronger at with the Whistle 4 launch is we had actually a pretty big beta test, but most of those beta users were existing Whistle users. As soon as we started selling into the market, we were having an issue where you can see here there's a little bit of a bent lug on our connection, and we realized that people who were used to using a Whistle knew how to put it on, just kind of put it on and twist, whereas new users were coming in and twisting the wrong way or pulling and were actually breaking it. And so identifying those before you have to scramble after launch to do it is definitely something you should be doing. So get the most diverse kind of beta group that you can.
I think one other thing on user testing as well is, unfortunately, like with Whistle, there's such a core component of data that is required, and so it forces us to have an ongoing beta program. There's also other alternatives out there for like usertesting.com and things of that nature, where you can actually not only test out the product offering itself, but test out like the actual user experience. And so I just want to make that clear distinction, because there's the actual, hey, does this product solve the problem we say it's solving, or is this verbiage confusing? Is this flow confusing? And so it's kind of distinct. Having those separate is a good thing to call out.
Yeah. Just on that really quickly, we had two questions come in. One, can you share, you did the sharing specific tools and methods that you use to gather and analyze the feedback from current customers as well as prospective customers, and how do you determine what is actionable? And the second question is, how do you decide what other features to build? How do you collect user feedback, analytics versus intuition versus trends?
Yeah, great question. And it's honestly something, it's an ongoing, like we're trying to figure that out for ourselves as well. In terms of our stack of analytics and everything, we have a variety of things that we're looking, that we use right now to get quantitative feedback from people. So we use Heap to basically look at how people are using the app, look at the user flows through sign up, how people are interacting with a feature, et cetera. And then being able to look at cohort usage over time, where we can say, okay, people who use this feature, we're trying to get to a better place where people who use this feature maybe churn less or use the product more often, et cetera. We also have tools around our existing database where we can just see similar things around how people are using the apps, et cetera. When it comes to qualitative talking with the users, we do have, as Stan mentioned, a good beta program. So a lot of our outreach is just to either the beta users or general surveys. So using
Typeform.
Yeah, Typeform, things. The good thing about working in the pet industry is oftentimes you can just go to a dog park and talk to people. So I know Russ, one of our product people, has just been like, he goes to the dog park with his dog all the time anyway. So chatting with people when he's there and getting their thoughts on things.
Yeah, on that note, like customer interviews are always great. Being a prior legal experience, you want to be careful. Just like when talking to customers or prospective customers, just having because you'll tend and so something to keep in mind as you are trying.
I think you're breaking in and out again.
That's why.
Are you there? I think we lost them. Are you guys back?
Yeah, we're here. You got us?
Yep, we missed that entire answer.
We'll jump in. We don't need the slides. We don't need the slides anyway.
Yeah.
But basically, it's best to just feel personal, have an open conversation with your customers, and feeling less like an interrogation, if you will. That's when you'll get a lot of the feedback. You also want to avoid, leading questions or ask questions in a way that you're hoping to get the answer you're looking for, right? So trying to avoid as much bias as possible. There's a lot of great resources and tools out there to sort of help you guys when you want to do more customer development. It can be very critical, because if you're using that as sort of critical piece of feedback to sort of make these changes. Making sure that you reduce as much bias out of that as possible is critical.
And the critical thing for a product manager as well is to, like, when you're talking to these people, it's not they asked for this and so I'm going to build this. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's that simple, but you know, you don't have to take for what they ask for. You need to take what they actually need. And so separating out the two is definitely an important kind of part of product management.
And what they're willing to pay for, I imagine, too.
They're willing to pay for as well. Yeah.
There's another question on new features. I think there's new features and there's also adoption rate of existing features. And so looking at sort of that data, there's always a desire to go build something new, but there's also as much benefit at times to, if you can identify those features or different things that are working for you, how can you increase the exposure of that feature to as many people as possible? Looks like, okay, we're good. And so I think there's always sort of, how do you just optimize what's working versus trying to build something new? And that will never go away. That's part of road mapping. That's part of product. That's like the core of what product manager is around, is in terms of what do we feel like is sort of new, and what are the things that we should sort of optimize for.
I'm going to read off some questions if that's okay. Is there more stuff that you want to get?
There's one or two more slides, but the questions are going to be much more interesting. So.
Okay. So one was, do you think that longer testing might have aided you in finding the customer GPS importance sooner? So, and then added to that, like, you know, how much testing does someone do before they launch? You know, they could add a bajillion features, but, like, you know.
Totally. Everyone's heard of, you know, a minimum viable product, right? MVP. There's a saying out there these days of, that's kind of a little outdated. People want like a minimal lovable product. So I think it's interesting in the sense that you want to get out there because you want to get your product out there, right? Because that's where you're going to learn the most. And so there's a little bit of intuition there in terms of, like, do we feel like it's ready? I'm sorry, I'm just blanking.
I don't think, in terms of the Whistle product in general, neither of us were here at the beginning, so I don't know necessarily how they feel about that.
I think fundamentally for that specific use case is they weren't trying to go after that audience. They knew that it existed, the GPS function. I think they were trying to attempt, is there another product out there? Like, would people buy it just for health monitoring alone? I think what they realized at the time was that was a hard sell. And so part of product management also, and product in general, is timing is very important, right? You saw 1 million social networks before Facebook got big. And so I think being really cognizant of what that is. If you ask the founders today of Whistle, they felt like it was they might have been just a little too early in terms of the help with the wellness product, and
it's something that was still getting its bearings in the human market.
Exactly, right. And so it might have been.
It made sense to jump on the trend, but it could have been a little bit earlier there.
And so it's kind of funny because we are coming a bit more full circle at Whistle and bringing back some of these features that were initially on Whistle's sort of vision or horizon. Just one funny anecdote. If you actually look at old pitch decks of Whistle from years ago, honestly, the core mission and value prop hasn't changed all that much. Maybe the execution tactics and timing of things has changed, obviously, how you get there. But the fundamental core mission and vision of the company really hadn't changed all that much.
So a question on that was about, you know, what changed when Mars acquired you guys, and you know, did it open up any channels or opportunities for you that otherwise didn't exist?
I think we're just now getting the fruits of that labor, I would say. I think initially there was strong desire to not disrupt Whistle, and let Whistle kind of figure it out on its own. I.e., bringing someone in to kind of lead the company or integrate it fully. I think, and this is also very common within other ecosystems where you are still a standalone product and a standalone company. I think we're at a point now where we're beginning to see the benefits more, and I think it does come specifically with the product offering, right? So I think Whistle Mars really was looking at the original Whistle Health monitor or activity monitor as sort of what they were buying, if you will. Whistle the company changed its direction or pivoted slightly to be more GPS focused in order to sell more units, right? And so things like the marketing headline on our website 4 years ago was very fear-based. It's like 1 in 3 dogs get lost. And so but naturally, we acquired a lot of customers or a different type of customer. I think we're coming, I mentioned full circle, we're beginning to kind of come back to the sort of this new customer, this customer who cares about the health and well-being of their pet more holistically. And so that is also, because of the shift in Whistle, it's aligned much more with what Mars can offer now. And so working with like for example, to use clear-cut examples, like the pet insight study that we've done, where you can actually detect scratching and licking, like there's no way in hell Whistle itself would have been able to do that without partnership of Banfield Pet Hospital, and they're a Mars brand.
Awesome. Next question from SJ. I'm building an app and have interested investors, but they want to see what traction I get first, i.e. the launch of the app. Any tips on what metrics you can show an investor prior to launch, and also how much time did you spend beta testing?
Yeah, I mean, we've come to a little bit of an age where just building a product is not enough typically to get venture funding. I think there was a period of time where the hurdles involved to just getting to building an app or an experience were high enough in terms of buying servers and everything else that like you actually needed funding. It's so relatively cheap and easy now to actually build and come out with an app. Not that it is what this product is easy per se, but the tools are out there. And so that investment bar from what I've seen, at least in terms of even seed investing, but particularly Series A, et cetera, people want to see, if it's an open, say, social product, they want to see 1 million users out there. They want to see like traction. They want to see people using it. And I think what they really want to go on is like, this isn't your hunch that what you're building is a good idea. They want to see proof of that good idea. And so like if you are pre-launch, and you're looking at kind of what metrics you should be recording when you actually do go and launch this, you're going to be wanting to look at just the general stuff of like, not only how many people are coming in and signing up for it, but actually how often are they using it. A lot of people's investment thesis is all around engagement and usage. So it's pretty easy to game a bunch of people downloading your app by paying for that on various channels. But it's really hard to fake engagement. And so, do a few rounds where you get it out there, bring people in, get the qualitative feedback that they're really enjoying it, get quantitative feedback based on, how often is somebody coming in and using your service, how many actions or, maybe clicks or actions per session are they doing? What is the like long sustaining value? How are the usage patterns over time? Are they coming in, using it, and then dropping off after 10 days? Or are they, using it more and more over time, meaning it's becoming more and more valuable to them? So users will always be looking at these types of metrics to really evaluate the product.
That's awesome. Question about China. All your stuff is made in China, I think, or I'm not sure, but
not anymore.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about the manufacturing process. Let's say you're a startup and you're trying to get, your first 10,000 units made or 1,000 units, whatever it is, specifically if you're a hardware product. Like, where would you start? I wouldn't even know.
Yeah, that's actually not our forte. I do have a hardware team here. I will say we build a lot of initial units in-house. And there's been a lot of amazing tools and research out there. 3D printing's been huge these days. So there's now more than ever, just like software, it's actually quite easy to also prototype hardware. And so I think when you're thinking of things like China, you're looking at that in terms of scale, right? When you have a business, when you have units to fulfill and you're trying to actually reduce the cost to manufacture that product. But initially, if you're trying to get a hardware product off the ground, it's probably best to make sure you're building the right thing. And so that probably means keeping things local, doing a lot more iterations initially, because as you can imagine, there are a lot of things that just get lost in translation. The lead times for working with China and anything overseas is, while it might be cheaper, you're going to end up paying for it early on because you're not getting the results and efficiency as you'd like.
And just real quick here, because I know we got time, but there are hardware focused incubators, and not to push anyone in a different direction from, but like there are hardware focused incubators. And one of the things that they're really great at is helping with exactly that. Like they know if there's a cheaper, Wi-Fi component that you can use, and they have relationships with all the manufacturers that they can kind of point you towards when you're ready. But I agree with Stan, kind of getting as far as you can in the prototyping phase before you move over to manufacturing is key.
Great. And Dan has a bunch of questions. Is specifically on GPS tracking for pets, is it still niche, or is it niche? Is it overcrowded? Where do you think it's going?
Depends what niche is.
Yeah, it depends what niche is. I mean, we've built a pretty robust product. Amazon just launched a pet tracker. There's rumors of Apple having another tracking device. So I don't think the problem by any means is going away. I think for Whistle's perspective, the technology is there, the hardware is there, right? So it's actually really easy to duplicate that for someone like Amazon or Apple to do that, right? So as you're a company like Whistle, you're actually trying to create some defensiveness, right? So how can we actually you hear every day of the big guys taking out, some of these smaller companies because on tech alone, right? And so where can we differentiate? And that's also why we're baking so much on health and having this wider audience. Because if we were purely just a tile or just a tracker for pets, ultimately there's people out there who can do that more efficient than Whistle can.
And we do think that there's an advantage to focusing only on pets as well. That some of these other guys don't. And there are a lot of other activity monitors and GPS trackers in the market. So it is a crowded market for sure. And kind of our success really comes down to execution on the hardware, as well as some of the, knowledge that we built up over the years, kind of being the first to a lot of these things.
Cool.
I would say performance is key there.
Cool. In 30 seconds or less, someone said, my introduction. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, we cut out for a second.
Oh, no worries. Okay. 30 seconds or less. Someone said, my introduction to product management taught me to think of MVP as maximum value proposition rather than minimum viable product. What do you think about that?
It really depends on the company, the appetite for risk, how you're like I said, if you go with that tiered launching thing, there is definitely a certain point where I forget who said it, but like if you're really, really proud of what you launched, then it probably wasn't an MVP. Like you launched too late. There's definitely that mindset. And it's always a balancing game, and it has to do with kind of, the life cycle of the company, what you're trying to achieve. Are you literally trying to get it out there to get data to get back? Or is this a big press announcement of you're like, hey, I'm coming onto the scene? And so, each product manager has to really address that with the company and the stage of growth they're in. And also the industry, like you can't have an MVP if you are making a medical device product.
That's actually
people's and like when we think about, for example, the safety component of what we're doing, we don't treat that as an MVP. We want that to be like, hey, this is tested and true. Whereas when we're talking about a joy feature or something else, like we have a lot more, looseness with what we consider a launchable product.
Context is key there.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to be cognizant of time. Thank you both so very much for joining us today. For anybody that has more questions, just shoot me an email or leapventurestudio at gmail.com. And if there's, I see there are a couple more questions, I'll email you. Maybe you guys can answer or can.
Yeah, we're happy to take anything by email for sure.
Awesome. So thank you very much for your time, and thanks everybody else for joining us today. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.